Though the northern Muslims have mixed feelings about returning to their villages, they still want their problems resolved. But will the state finally pay due attention to the North Muslim issue? Will the Muslim political leadership mobilize itself to push for their concerns to be addressed? I spoke with researcher and activist Dr. Farzana Haniffa to find out more. It's been nearly 20 years since the Muslims from the northern province of Sri Lanka were evicted by the LTTE. Today, the war is over and the LTTE is no more. What is the situation of the North Muslims today, as it stands today?
Well, the defeat of the LTTE and sort of the, taking them out of the equation really changed the whole situation in relation to the Northern Muslims, because for the first time, there was one entity that they really didn't have to deal with, or they don't have to deal with, because even though there was the possibility of going back earlier, there was always the threat that there might be another expulsion, or that the LTTE might sort of, or who was to guarantee that the LTTE wouldn't do it again, right? But now the absence of the LTTE means that whole threat is no longer there. So, many Northern Muslims that I've spoken to are eager to go back. I mean, even if it is not to completely relocate there, I mean, they want to go back, they want to sort of like find their homes, they want to find the lands, I mean, they want to sort of make that connection, with the place that they were expelled from.
And do you think authorities are being sensitive to what the North Muslims want in terms of resettlement and relocation?
Well, at this point, it's really not clear that they are. I mean, there are certain processes that are taking place. For instance, I think through the Ministry of Resettlement, there was a sort of a go and see visit recently where, a large number of families visited and actually decided to stay back after the visit. So there are sort of small things happening with regards to the Muslims, but it's unclear that there is a real plan, that there is, there's any sort of systematic resettlement activity for the Northern Muslims.
But what do you think of the Muslim political leadership? Have they handled this issue adequately, in your opinion?
Well, I think they are beginning to be aware of the need to address it, and they are becoming mobilized around it. For instance, a lot of the political actors became very active after the government announced that there was a registration process for all the old IDPs. But I think historically, the Northern Muslim question has not emerged as very important, because the war-affected Muslim communities, for one thing, have only gotten organized very recently, and for another thing, have been divided along regional lines, because sort of the problems that the Eastern Muslims faced were different from those faced by the Northern Muslims. So therefore, sort of developing a common position on the Northern Muslim issue has been difficult. So, or the war-affected Muslim issue, say the Muslims affected by the conflict, has been difficult, because and also sort of in terms of vote bases, there was a larger vote base in the East, I think, than there was in the North. So that also influenced to a certain extent in keeping the Northern Muslim question sort of out of the limelight. But now, I mean, the situation is really different, and sort of the Muslim civil society as well as Muslim political society is much more organized, and the importance of dealing with this question.
Now, you are part of a commission of inquiry into the expulsion of the Northern Muslims. Can you tell me more about the inquiry?
Yes. Now, this is a commission process. It's a commission. It's a citizens' commission. Now, close to 65,000 people were expelled in 1990 and driven out from their homes from 5 districts of the north. Okay. Now, this is not adequately integrated into the narrative of the conflict, into the history of the conflict of Sri Lanka. So, I think there's a huge need to document this, especially for the Northern Muslims themselves. So, that is one of the sort of the primary reasons that this commission has been formulated. Now, the other reason is that the Northern Muslims themselves have agitated for a long time for a presidential commission of inquiry into the expulsion, and this hasn't happened to date. So, it is hoped that this will be, the Citizens Commission will be sort of a forerunner to a more sort of institutionalized state investigation into the expulsion. So, that's another reason that we are doing it. Now, the third reason was to, document this expulsion, how the expulsion happened. The experience of the expulsion itself is different in the 5 different districts. In Jaffna, people were given 2 hours literally to leave. In Mena, it was less so. In Mullaitivu, people had more notice and people left, during a larger period of time. So, this difference needs to be documented. right? And so, and we want to sort of document these different experiences, and from this information to make specific recommendations to the government as to what needs to be done where. You know, what are the pressing needs and what are the needs in particular areas? How are they different? You know, so to have some, you know, really sort of important information through which to do this recommendation writing. So these are sort of some of the reasons why we are doing this.
Right now, what do you feel needs to be done to ensure that the grievances and the rights of the Northern Muslims are addressed adequately?
Well, I mean, you know, the most pressing thing is to plan for the resettlement of the Northern Muslims. Now, for instance, you know, there are plans being put into place for the future of the North. You know, there's a huge development plan that is being initiated, right? But this plan, it's not clear if this plan includes the Northern Muslims who will return to these places or who intend to return to these places. So there are very important things that are happening now which might have huge long-term impacts if they are not looked at from the perspective of including the Northern Muslims. So that's one thing. And the other thing is now, you know, Northern Muslims are expecting to return, and there are Tamil communities already in these places who don't know the history of coexistence that the Tamil and Muslim communities had before the expulsion. So, you know, measures need to be taken to educate these people, to give some, to do some sort of groundwork, you know, to facilitate the Northern Muslim return, and sort of, you know, they will be they will be sort of inserting themselves into the local economies. You know, there might be conflicts that might arise as a result of that. So, you know, there needs to be some planning, some anticipation of these things before the Northern Muslims go, and it shouldn't be ad hoc. It should be, you know, some thinking needs to be done. So, you know, I mean, it's important that the government takes cognizance of this.
So finally, to end with, do you see a positive future for the Northern Muslims?
Well, I think the Northern Muslims anticipate a positive future. You know, I think it's a really amazing time for them. It's full of promise. People are talking of going back. People are talking about what it was like in the North before they left. And so I think they are anticipating a lot of changes. You know, the younger generations, you know, they don't know what the North is like. I mean, they were not born there, they were born outside of the North. So the connections that these people have with the places in which they were displaced for 20 years are not going to be severed, you know, and I don't think it's fair to expect those connections to be severed either. But they do see themselves very much as Northern Muslims, you know, and they see that connection as very strong. And I think it's good that they return and they maintain that connection, and they maintain the sort of the geographical and the physical link with the places from which they were driven out, because they were in fact a community from the North, and they have huge, you know, long-standing historical links with the North, and that should be maintained. So I think, I mean, it's a very promising time for that, you know, and it's a promising time, and you know, we are talking about the end of the war. We are talking about sort of a better future for our country. I mean, sort of these are the things that need to happen for that future to be realized, I think.